sort of a full shoulder turn, well not quite, a three-quarter turn anyway, and yet the club, let's say, has only gone back a short distance. Now what this leads to is a situation now where really the club has got so much further to travel, and there's going to be a lot of independent arm movement to get to the top. Either that, or if you don't have a lot of flexibility, your swing's going to be very short. So it's very important to learn to synchronize the turn of the body, the hips and the shoulders that is, with the movement of the club, the hands and the arms. And this all starts in the beginning. And I think Nick will show the folks at home a little drill here that really helps to get into this position.
Right, what we're trying to do here is resist the right side from turning too quickly at the beginning of the swing. And what I do is I pull my right hand up here, the club is in the 6 o'clock position, I'm going to move it to the 8 o'clock position there. Here's my right hand and I'm going to move this back, making sure that the forearms touch here and the club is in this position. Now you can see my right shoulder hasn't over-rotated in here. It stayed nice and in sync with the club head.
Right.
And from here, I'm going to put my right hand on the club and just basically go ahead and hit it.
Now that's an excellent drill, because what it does, it really teaches you where you need to be in what we call this 8 o'clock position. This 8 o'clock position, if you can get right there, a lot of people have so many problems in that first bit, whether, as we spoke about, with the club head or with the body turn. So if we can get that body sort of synchronizing early on where we don't want a lot of turn. It's really the club head moves this distance and the body just moves a very short distance. Right. And that way you build up not only synchronization but also coil, which leads to power.
Right.
You want to feel you're actually moving just a little laterally. That gets your weight starting to move to the right side, and then you make the turn. It's what I call a lateral rotation.
Right. I'm sure a lot of people are going to confuse this now, Dave, with a sway. I know a lot of people, when I say to them, move the weight over onto the right side, they say, well, aren't I swaying?
Right. Well, as long as your weight doesn't move to the outside of the foot, you're in good shape. Right. So the key being is, if we have a shaft up here, and we'll illustrate this with an umbrella in a second, but you literally want to feel like you're moving into this shaft and then turning away from it. See, that actually gets you to your right side. It really gets you moving behind the ball. So instead of standing and working around, say, a fixed center point here, you're actually moving around a point which is now down your right side. So it really does help you to get the feeling of moving this way and then turning. Nick, we place the umbrella in the ground, not quite vertical, at a slight angle towards you. Now the big key is, as you work it back, is that you really want to feel like you're moving into that umbrella and then turn away from it. So as you turn back, as you complete the backswing, certainly you'll be moving away from it. But to start with, you want to bump into that umbrella. And the weight will stay on the inside of the foot, but it does give you that feeling of moving into that right side.
Right, as opposed to what we were talking about earlier, which is that.
That's exactly right.
You see the angle, the distance has increased.
Precisely. Okay,
so let's go ahead and try.
Stand right up next to the umbrella, if you would. Thanks. No, that was good. See, it gives you the feel, and also visually you can have a look down and just check where you are, which is obviously of great importance. In summarizing the start of the swing, I'd like you to remember 3 major points. Firstly, to keep the club head outside of your hands as you start back. Secondly, to have resistance with your right side so that it does not turn too early. And thirdly, to make sure that you feel that your hips move slightly laterally before you make the turn. Well, these aspects have been relatively boring so far, Nick, so let's get into the meat of the swing, shall we, and talk about how we get the club to the top of the swing. And that pretty much involves talking about swing plane, and we want to check it sort of at a halfway back position. That's the point that I believe that we really need to have a look at it.
Right, a good reference point I've always felt, David, is when the left arm gets to parallel on the way back, and it's much easier to see there when the club is on plane or if it's out of plane.
Right, well, plane, obviously it's a geometrical term, and really we use the shaft at address as a guideline. So we can see, obviously every club is a little different. The shorter irons are more upright.
A little bit more over here.
Right, and the longer clubs obviously flatter. But using this as a guide, what we want to try to do certainly is picture this swing being on a plane which is, say, lying on its side, but there again, we want to make sure that the most important aspect of the swing is the plane coming down. And in order to help that, we need to get the club in a good plane going back. Now, let's have a look at a couple of problems that we see at that halfway back point as far as the plane is concerned. Okay, well, the first one we see, which is very common, is the fact that the club is too, as we term it, laid off, where the butt of the club would actually point way beyond the ball. Now, from here, obviously, you've got to make a lot of adjustments to get it back online. Exactly right. Or otherwise, the opposite of that is where we see the club plane too steep. We can see the shaft plane here too steep. Now, somewhere between the two is our ideal position. And what we want to look at is trying to get the club on a plane which, as I say, allows us to get it back on a consistent plane or line on the angle on the downswing. Right. So why don't you just show the folks here, if you just hold both clubs, this is a little exercise we use at times. There we are. Okay.
Right, the left forearm is in the parallel position.
Now, if we look at the shaft here, an extension of this one, it looks somewhere between the feet and the ball line, and normally a little closer to the ball target line. And I always feel, if you look at many of the top players, this is the position they really get in, where it's a little steeper than where it started originally. It started originally, say, at this point, at a halfway back point, it'd be a little steeper, and this will encourage, as the body moves correctly, a shallowing as it comes down, which we'll get into a little later. But this point here is very important to understand. We can see that the club is in a good position. The left arm is slightly across the body, although not stuck across the chest. The right elbow has started to fold outwards very slightly and is above the left arm. And we're in a good position there really to complete the backswing. You see, what I feel, Nick, is that this position, apart from a small turn, is the top of your backswing position. All you've got to do is turn and
get
boom.
to the top.
There you go. So this is an excellent checkpoint, and where many people are, in actual fact, a little out.
Right, and I think it's much harder to get to the correct position from the laid off or a steep position here than it is if you've got it right here. Very simple move, because all we're doing is turning our shoulders to 90 degrees.
Exactly. And I would say if you're going to err in any direction, you want to err to a slightly steeper plane here rather than that flat one, which you then probably have to lift and get out, and you'll be out of position.
Right.
I know in your case, you have a beautiful change of direction, and you know, your club plane at times, maybe one of your errors, maybe it gets a little bit too steep at times. So we're obviously trying to work on trying to get it into what we would term a neutral plane for you. So that little exercise, the little drill that we use.
Okay, we choke down on the club. Get your hands right down on the bottom of the grip, almost touching the top of the shaft there. You have a little bit of the club sticking out. Take your normal stance. You'll be a little bit closer to the ball than normal. Then you get the club back through the takeaway position here to the halfway where the forearm is parallel. Now you can see.
Right. Now you can see here. Right, if we get into this position and Mick just completes his turn, we're in a perfect top of the backswing position. So what I'd like you to do, you can hit shots like this, and just to get your rhythm, just pump it a couple of times.
Right.
And make a little turn with your chest, all right, just once, twice, and then go ahead and just hit it from there.
And the big thing is when you do this drill is not to hit it too hard, Dave. You really want to do it more as a drill than trying to hit the ball too hard. So once, two.
That's pretty good.
Well, I didn't whiff it. Once, two, once.
When one focuses on faults at the top of the backswing, I think one tends to look maybe in the wrong place. A lot of people focus on what the left arm's doing and where it is and the position of it and so on. But I think a whole host of problems are caused through the right arm not working correctly. If you can get your right arm in the proper position, you'll certainly get into a proper position coming down into impact. And what I see a lot with a lot of players, and we've worked hard on this ourselves, Nick, is that fact that many players don't understand where the right arm should be. And the fault being that the right elbow gets too narrow here, so we lose width.
And very close to the body here.
Gets too deep behind us, which now gets the club out of position and makes the arms travel too far. And the other important thing is that if the right arm doesn't set properly as well, you don't get the correct wrist cock.
Right.
So we have to learn to get the right arm in the proper position so we can really load up this right shoulder, create a lot of coil, get the club on the right plane, and get it coming down to impact. We've got a good drill that we worked on quite a few years ago.